So welcome back to Turf and Tarmac, the SACU podcast. Today I've got a bit of a special mental health podcast for Men's Mental Health Month. So we are joined by our Learning and Development Manager, Shabazz, our Sports Development Intern, Arif, and Gary, who is the coordinator of the Edinburgh Monarchs Academy, and he's also a trained mental health first aider as well. So we've got a variety of different people to speak about their experiences in mental health and what the sport does for it as well. So firstly, I think that we should pass on to the older people in the call to say what's changed in the past 5 to 10 years regarding men's mental health? Like, is the stigma going away? Is it what's changed?
I'll take that one first. So yeah, from a kind of practical perspective, I think there's been probably over the last 5-6 years there's been a greater emphasis on good mental health, bearing in mind obviously everybody has mental health. It's not an affliction, and I think when people get their head around the idea that everybody has mental health, whether it's good, bad, or a combination of that, you start to sort of move forward with some of this stuff. I think in terms of stigma, I think there's a lot of organisations, professional and sports, who are taking it more seriously than they ever did. I think there's still a long way to go. I think some employers and some sports organisations are better than others. And I think we're kind of seeing a situation where, interestingly, like, different other, so we say socioeconomic groups, we're probably seeing more people prepared to come forward and say that they have challenges in the mental health space than ever before. We know that it's not a new phenomenon. It's not suddenly 3-4 years ago mental health started to be a thing, or bad mental health started to be a thing. It's always been there. It's just people have been afraid to speak. And I think it's kind of good and refreshing. And I always encourage, people to chat through the kind of various avenues I have open to myself in terms of trying to promote that. So yeah, again, I think there's still a bit to go. But I think certainly, listening to people saying we've got challenges and reaching out for some assistance from either their peer groups or professionally can only be good for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I'd agree with that. I think, someone is sort of talking in their mid-20s, 5-10 years ago, I don't think it's probably something we spoke about very much, but I think having sort of young nieces and nephews, I think they speak about it a lot more than what we maybe did when we were at school, and they seem to be a lot more aware of it. And I also think with the advances in technology, everybody's on their phone, and I think there's a lot more getting shared on the likes of Facebook and Instagram, and there's probably a lot more of an awareness than there probably was, as I say, 5-10 years ago. And I definitely know now that I feel that there's maybe less of a stigma attached to men speaking about their feelings. I think there's been a lot more campaigns, there's been a lot more awareness, where I know that I'd be, more than capable of phoning up my friend and telling him I love him, but would that have been accepted, maybe 10-20 years ago? I don't know.
I think as well, I think some of the language around about mental health has dramatically changed. Some of the tags that go, 10 years ago, you wouldn't think twice about calling somebody you're mad, or you're a schizo, or you're just fairly terms of our everyday language. And I think actually now as derogatory, and you wouldn't use it because it would upset someone who genuinely is. And one of the challenges with speaking to people is, unlike a broken leg, physical health is very, very visible. You can see somebody with a broken leg. You can't see somebody that's got a challenge in the mental health space. And you've always got to be careful about who you speak to and how you speak to them. It's important that you do speak to them, but it's the language that's kind of changed over the last, I would suggest, the last 2-3 years, maybe even, particularly in the workplace. Casual language that is perhaps was used then is not got a place now. because there's
Yeah.
a greater awareness.
Definitely. And again, that kind of goes back to the point I was saying, that, you know, when you were younger and you almost said something that was maybe considered a bit feminine, there was always those sort of bad remarks that went around that, as you say, they're not socially acceptable anymore. I mean, they weren't acceptable back then, but, you know, so I think that's definitely moved on and almost, again, pulled down another barrier, because men feel that they can speak a little bit more and they're not going to be necessarily judged, you know, because of that.
Well, I mean, if I could, talking with my personal experience, because I haven't been in this country, and then I've mostly like spent my life in, and then the stigma, especially in India, like 5-10 years ago, or even 5 years ago, was, I think the major problem was the lack of education about it, because like I suffer, obviously everyone has their own mental issues, and then I've had mine, and then I couldn't, the thing is, even with me, I knew something was wrong with me, but then I did not know what it was. So even the word depression, it wasn't like that long ago which I learned what depression is, and I could define it and I could put a word to it. So we weren't taught what it was, and there was no education about it. So I couldn't go to my mom like and say, like how you're talking about, or how Gary was talking about, say a broken leg, and then you can see it, and then I can go show that this is where it pains, right? I couldn't go to my parents and then say what was wrong with me. So the education bit was lacking, and the stigma was obviously there, because the whole masculinity bit, right? Even like as a child, I was told, even if I was feeling with, even by my parents, that you have to just get on with it. And then because men cannot be weak. That's what my father used to always say, like, men cannot cry, men cannot be weak. You have to like motivate yourself and just get on with whatever you're feeling. So I think the stigma and the suppression was there back then. But then, like, even when I came into this country, and then let's say when I've had trouble with my assignments and things, it was very shocking that they considered, for me, to be honest, especially, that they considered mental illness as an illness as well. And they had special contingencies in place to help students with that, because I never saw that back in India. That wasn't the thing. Like, even in schools, mental health was never spoken about. So I suppose it is heading in the right direction, but then it hasn't reached the levels it needs to, especially like in the Eastern countries. But then the progress is there, yeah.
I think as well that recently there's been a fair few high level people across sport who have openly spoke about their mental illness. You know, people like from the boxing world, Tyson Fury has been very open about his struggles. You know, people like Simone Biles, who obviously pulled out of the Olympics. I mean, you can't get more open than that. And then in our world, Fabio Quartararo, who just became OGP world champion this year. Last year, he was leading the world championship with however many rounds to go and lost it because he suffered from anxiety, and he ended up just like not being able to round the season out because he was worrying about this and worrying about that. And then after it all happened, openly admitted that that's what happened. You know, he cracked under the pressure, you know, suffering from these mental things that were bothering him. And yeah, I mean, I think that the fact that people at a very high level are now showing that it happens in sport, that is, it's actually making more people come out and speak about it. Because you know, beforehand you would never have seen like anybody at a high level of sport admitting that that was what was wrong. They would always put it down to something else. So I think that's a real positive going forward.
I think definitely, like in the sporting world, these people coming out, you know, these athletes and these sort of superstars in sport coming out and talking about it is really, really important, because I think in years gone past, you know, we've always thought of these athletes as being like really mentally strong and being really mentally resilient. It's all about grit, and if you failed, it's because you didn't perform well enough or you weren't mentally strong enough. But I think now these people coming out shows us that even the top level athletes, these people will be mentally strong. They'll have determination, they'll have grit, but they still need to talk about things. They still need to rely on other people. And I think if we can see that in our idols, as it were, then it almost makes you think, no, do you know what? I'm not feeling great today. I will tell my friend, you know, yeah, I'm having a bit of a crap day. Can we go and grab a coffee or something? You know, I will talk to my missus, you know, and say this is, you know, I'm having a bit of stress at work. And yeah, I think it's really important for people to come out and be that example.
I
I think that's a good. I think that's a really good point, actually. This whole idea that a professional athlete at the top of their game, or a professional sportsman at the top of their game, is almost like a kind of infallible, because they've kind of got this sort of mental. You believe they've got a kind of mental structure in there that kind of makes them unbeatable, but I think the reality of it is it's a wee bit like a race. I kind of sort of make an analogy of kind of like a racehorse. If your average horse in the field, is one thing. A thoroughbred racehorse is another thing. They're quite highly strung. That's why they wear blinkers. They have to be. They're trained to be in a certain environment to do a certain thing, and anything that gets in the way of that, they can't handle. And I think I was kind of finding this is kind of quite why I quite like understanding the links between physical first aid and mental first aid, is that we see particularly young guys falling off motorbikes at 70 miles an hour, or in similar disciplines a lot faster, and they get up because they're just full of adrenaline and testosterone, and they kind of just I'm getting back on my bike. But actually we disregard the fact that they could be physically, they can have a physical injury which they carry, and they continue to carry because they think they're going to keep going on, and in the long term it doesn't do them any good. I've known so many riders who, and this is sort of coming out in terms of having sort of poor mental personality. We've had a couple of riders in Speedway this season who have taken time out of the sport at various points because they publicly acknowledge that their mental health is not in a good space, and they need to take the time away. Whereas maybe before, it's just been a sort of situation where maybe a speedway rider's had a few bumps over the course of a very short period of time, and as well as maybe knocking the stuffing out of them physically a wee bit, there's this idea where their head's not in the right place. Their heads away, they can't ride because they can't hack it. Now we're kind of seeing that no, it's not a case that they can't hack it. It's just the fact that they need to kind of take some time out. They kind of need to relax. They need to kind of reflect on their own well-being and go back to a sport when they're ready. One of the other things about Speedway is the fact that these guys are professional, and if they don't ride, they don't get paid. If they don't get paid, they don't feed their families and that kind of stuff. It's not like football. You can spend months on a treatment table and still get paid. So these guys are looking for their next pay packet, and having a physical injury, far less a mental health issue, is not good for them. So you get a lot of them. I speak to them, and you just know that there's just something there that they just want to take a step back and think of their well-being before anything else. But sadly, the environment doesn't always let them do that. But it's a fair point made about sportsmen and falling off and that kind of stuff.
Adding to say Gary's point, right? I mean, I couldn't give you the perspective of a rider, but then I follow football. The problem with football over the years has been we celebrate people going through grit and injuries. I can say remember the instances where Schweinsteiger in the World Cup, 2014 World Cup, he was bleeding, and he was physically bleeding, and he didn't want to get off. And understandable, because he had the rush of adrenaline. It was the World Cup final, and then the crowd was cheering for him, because we are hardwired to, let's say, always celebrate that. And then over the years, then recently, like how Callum was talking about different sports, let's say the elite sports members coming out, how Christian Pulisic came out from football, Ben Stokes coming out in cricket, and then even Naomi Osaka taking out a French Open, I suppose, with the entire media pressure and in general, especially when these elite sportsmen talk about the mental health in general, it kind of raises awareness in a good way, because like Shabazz said, we idealize them to such an extent that we sometimes forget that these are also human beings with general human problems as well, and they can also have mental health issues. And especially at such an elite level, when there's so much pressure on them, it's only going to increase. but then we expect them to be superhumans. So when they come out and then talk about it, like it kind of makes it easy for us to have that conversation, because now they are normalizing it instead of how before we used to celebrate them, just brushing it off and then with the adrenaline rushing through.
I think as well, it's actually quite almost like an inspirational thing as well. I think the way that things are moving on, because in the past, if an athlete, say, who was being paid to be somewhere by a sponsor or by a team, had to pull out because of something like that, they would absolutely put it down to, oh, I've pulled a hamstring, or I've done this, or I've done that, and not speak about it, because having poor mental health probably wasn't a good enough reason for them not to do it in a sponsor's eyes or in a team's eyes, whereas now that's absolutely not the case. And I can't think of a single example of where it would be the case. But in previous years gone by, saying I'm just not in the frame of mind today would absolutely not be a good enough reason. And I think now it absolutely is, and it always kind of should have been.
Yeah.
Just at a reef, I was just, you were saying obviously you've got experience of kind of living abroad and perhaps some sport abroad. How do you feel kind of team sports working in, say, countries like India? Is there a kind of lot of pressure to perform? Is there a lot of pressure, to an extent that people can't express their mental well-being or poor mental health being, adequately? Is it improving?
The thing with sports, especially like in general, is right, the people associate, and then the love for sports gets so much, the involvement gets so much. So there are examples where, especially let's say cricket in India, when the Indian cricketers do not perform, so they are like, the crowd goes to their places and then they pelt stones to their houses, and then they have to face this trauma now. They're like sitting in their house, and then because they don't perform, right? So they then have to face, it's like a pressure of 1 billion people, and it's not easy. And then like they cannot even speak about it, because in India, I mean, it is improving, but then absolutely, like, we're able to say that I'm not having a bad day, like good day is a good enough reason for me to stay home. It is not in India. That's not how it works. You have to, like, say, get up, go to work, perform, even in sports, and then post that, if you're not performing even in your sport, let's say you're going through a rough patch of form, they will let you know, and then the pressure only adds to it. So the pressure is immense, to be honest, like on the elite sports at any level, but then especially in India, where the awareness is not that much. I don't think any cricketer could come out and then easily speak about mental health, because I don't know, in a way, for the average Indian crowd, it's not that relatable. They wouldn't know what it is. So yeah, that way it is very immense, yes.
Yeah.
So going forward, actually, it leads on quite nicely that to what we're going to speak about next. So the next thing we're going to speak about is our own experiences within sport. But before we do that, I'm just going to quickly say, like, just leading on from what you said, Arif, that from a very, very young age is usually where you get what kind of person you're going to be. So as in a sports context is what I mean. So for instance, if you're in a football team at 6-7 years old, and your coach is a bit of an elitist and everything's about winning, and it's all pressure from a very, very young age, then that's what you're kind of used to, if you know what I mean. Like, you're used to having that pressure, and that's what is almost like it. Again, it used to be socially accepted that even at 6 years old, 7 years old, you would get, your coach would be on your back all the time, and it would just be about winning and things like that. And I think that that's changed massively as well recently. A lot of youth sport is now, it's not so much youth sport. It is youth sport, but it's seen more as like it's more hobbies, and it's more something that you do for fun, as opposed to, oh, you're going to go and do this, and you're going to go and do that because you're going to go and get this. In my experience anyway, when I was younger, I know a lot of my friends went to football training, and it was because they wanted to go here, and they were going to do this, and this to get there. But it was more, you could almost hear it was their dads or their coaches talking. It wasn't like what a young person would think. So I think that's changed over the years, and I think that definitely helps young people actually enjoy sport for what sport's meant to be, and not for any elitist reasons. And it's the elitist reasons that mean that you get the pressure, and it means that you end up with the anxiety, or all these different bits and pieces. So I think that now that that's changed, that's really, really good.
Yeah, I mean, I can say that from, having been involved in sports development for the last sort of 10, 11 years, there's been a lot more research put into it of why kids and why people in general take part in sport. I mean, all of us around the table, if we've ever taken part in any sport, it's because we enjoy it. It's not because we want to win. Yes, you maybe do want to win. I mean, I play rugby, so I don't ride, but I go out on a Saturday and I want to win, but that's not the be all and end all. If I don't win the game, it's not the end of the world. Where I think before, maybe 5, 10 years ago, even at the lower levels, of age grade stuff, it was all about winning. But I think now coaches understand that it's fun. Kids are there because they want to have fun. They want to be running about with their mates. They want to be on bikes with their mates. And for me, I think it's really important to continue that as well, because I think even still to this day, you get to a certain level in sport and you're an adult, and all of a sudden it's not supposed to be fun anymore. And now it's all about winning. It's all about developing as a player or a rider. So I think there has to be a bit of a mix there. There has to be a bit of a balance. And while I think we're en route to get there, I still think we're probably not where we need to be across the spectrum. There'll be certain sports that maybe are, or certain coaches that maybe are. But I think in general, I think we all need to sort of take a step back sometimes and go, firstly, why am I here? And why are the kids and why the adults, the riders, the players, why are they here?
Yeah, I think that, in our sport, I mean, I'm sure that you'll all have heard the term "a motocross dad" is what it's kind of focused towards. You've got the dad on the side of the track shouting at the son and threatening to put the bike in the back of the van if you don't pull your finger out. That's what our sport's kind of been like for the past wee while, and it's definitely moving away from that. And if there's one thing that I could say from experience to any parents who are listening, bike racing is fun. It's a privilege to go bike racing because it's got its financial ties and things like that. It's an absolute privilege, so it's not something that should be taken lightly by children. However, it is just for fun. It's not the be all and end all. If they go out and they're half a second off their PB, or if they finish third instead of second, or whatever it is, if your kid comes in and is happy, got a smile on his face or whatever, you've done your job, and that's what you're there for.
Yeah, what I always find is that we're kind of getting off tangent a little bit here, but nobody goes out and plans not to perform to their best. Nobody goes, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to finish second today. It doesn't happen. So for me, it's always really weird. Like, and again, going back to my sport, is seeing families on the touchline on the sideline, talking to the child, I didn't do this well, I didn't do that well. Your head's just not in it. You're kind of like, of course it is. I'm here to enjoy myself. I'm here to play the sport. Why would my head not be in it? I just didn't win today, or I didn't come first today, or whatever. So, yeah, as I say, a bit of a tangent, but it's just one of those things that you still see, popping up from time to time.
I mean, adding especially about the sport bit, right? Like the lower levels is one thing, but then talking about the pressure at the elite level, I think it also comes with the attachment which fans do have. So like if I could bring up a recent example in like football, so Harry Maguire, like Manchester United player, got a red card, and then he was photographed, say, going out for his dad's birthday party the same night. And then you could see online and even articles written about it, that how could a player after getting a red card, and then even like go out, like say Sun and Telegraph coming out that this is shameful, this is disgraceful. So it's like now where people, like the problem there is like they get so involved in it that they tend to not separate that sport is also at the end of the day a job for him. So when he comes out of the job, and he deserves to have a night, like a chill night, but then like the pressure which is added only adds to like the point where, say, you're only mounting the pressure, and then that can affect the mental health, I suppose. So with that attachment, right? And I think that is like a fine line where you have to tread very slowly there. That is where, again, I think the problem is, and the problem still persists at elite level sports, where people take it so passionately that they tend to forget it, that it's at the job at the end of the day. And post 3 p.m. or 5 p.m., when he's done playing, he's a normal human being who deserves to have their own happiness. So, yeah, I think that's where we should look at.
It'd be really interesting, Callum, to hear your point of view, because granted, you're not a fully professional rider, you don't make a living out of it, but you are an elite rider in Scotland, congratulations having just won your championship, so it'd be really good to hear, is the pressures on you, for example, do you ever think, oh, I need to win this race, otherwise I'm going to get dropped by my sponsor, for example?
Yeah, so I can actually speak about a good few things going through the years. I actually start off from when I was a little bit younger and kind of work my way up. When I was a little bit younger, I was carrying a little bit of timber. Don't mind saying it. I was a wee bit heavier than I should have been, and in order to try and fix that, I'm not going to say that I had an eating disorder, but I would actively set the pressure. I knew that was the problem, because that was what the family and the team spoke about. You need to try and shift a little bit of weight. But I kind of took that to heart. So I was 12 years old, 13 years old, and I was setting alarms on my phone for in the morning to remind me not to eat in the morning. Like, I would say, do not eat. And then I would have an alarm, an hour later saying, do not eat, another alarm. And then you end up making yourself ill, thinking you're doing the right thing when you're not. I mean, it's a massive thing, because it's all about education. I mean, as a youngster, you don't really know much about nutrition, and if your family don't take much of an interest in, knowing what's the best things to do and the best ways to go about things, out of no other reason than poor education on it as well, then you've not really got somebody to teach you. So my fix for it and trying to lose weight was just don't eat. If you don't eat, then you're surely going to lose weight, which is obviously the complete wrong thing to do. I mean, I ended up in hospital when I was young, because I wasn't suffering from malnutrition, but I wasn't a million miles away from it. And obviously now looking back, you're like, how silly is that? But at the time, that felt like the right thing to do. So, that's one thing that I kind of suffered from when I was a little bit younger. Going further forward, I think no racer would tell the truth if they said they didn't get anxious. Nerves, however they show themselves within you, whether you've got trait anxiety, which is, you're anxious all the time, or like for myself, I've got a bit of state anxiety. So half an hour before a race starts, I've, start to get a little bit shaky, start to feel a bit sick. Couldn't tell you the amount of times I actually threw up before jumping on the bike. Needing to pee all the time, things like that is all signs of having a bit of anxiety before going on the bike. And for some people, that's much worse than others. And I think that's one of the reasons that Fabio Quartararo last year, fell off his bike and couldn't pull a performance together, was because he was so anxious about losing the championship lead and things like that. And then the same in 2019, I had a big crash. For the people watching on YouTube, this is what's left of the crash. And after that, it took me a long time to realise that what I was suffering from was a bit of a trauma disorder. Like, I was proper, I would wake up in the middle of the night, jumping out my skin, because I think that you would go back to that moment where he crashed. It took me a good 6 months after the crash, if not a little bit longer, to actually be able to go for that gap again, because you don't realise it until after the fact. But the reason you're not going for that gap is because you're kind of scared to crash again after experiencing what you already experienced. So it took me, like I say, probably the best part of a year, if I'm being honest, to get back to where I needed to be. But at the time, it's just so frustrating, because you don't realise that that's what's actually wrong with you until you get over it and look back. And the way you get over it is by analysing your performance and speaking to people about what you're feeling, why you're feeling it. And if you don't know, then it still helps to speak about it, because it still kind of, maybe if you don't say something out loud, it maybe triggers something in your own head. And that's one thing that you need to that I would say from my point of view is that my team, my family, friends, everybody just listened to my woes, if you like, at the time. I was just so fed up, and if I'm being honest, we nearly quit racing at the end of 2019 because I was just hating it. I just couldn't get on with it at all. So,
have you found you've got better at it? Have you developed coping mechanisms that help your anxiety, Callum?
Yeah. So, luckily for me, I'm studying sports coaching at uni. I'm in my final year of sports coaching at uni, so a lot of our classes and stuff have been on coach development to help athletes deal with things, which has obviously been good because you can coach yourself to do those things. And then obviously studying psychology has helped me massively to work out what to do. My biggest thing is my little pre-performance routine that I do. The deep breathing exercises, positive self-talk, things like that. All these things really, really help me. And it's such simple things that take very little time to do that help so much. And I can probably say that that's not just from a sporting point of view, but from everything. If you're a little bit nervous for a job interview and you have a bit of deep breathing and a bit of positive self-talk and remind yourself why you're there type thing, then it always helps.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, I've always kind of suffered from some form of anxiety. Anybody listens to me talk would not believe that for a minute. However, that's a coping mechanism in itself. I used to, I couldn't perform in exams at school. I kind of did what I needed to do, and I got what I needed to go, but it was never quite where it should have been. And I used to just get so anxious at exams that it made me ill. I kind of, and I didn't really recognize that until I was a good bit older, but maybe probably about kind of 20 years ago, somebody kind of and again, this is kind of really before mental health had kind of kicked to where it is now. But somebody kind of sat me down and said, "Have you heard about the Amygdala, which is part of your brain?" Again, can maybe just going into the kind of theoretical part of the anatomical part of anxiety, but there's a bit of your brain called the amygdala, and what it does is it's the bit that produces adrenaline, or ephedrine, or cortisol. There's various kind of things, but if you let's just call it all adrenaline for a minute there. Adrenaline is created. Your brain cannot determine the difference between fear and excitement. It's the same emotion, right? So the amygdala part of it, your brain tries to make sense of emotions. Excitement and fear are the same thing. So if you've got a kind of fear for something, so whether it's getting on a motorbike and having a race, or speaking in front of people, or really anything that causes anxiety for you, one of the tricks I was told is fuel your brain. So what you do is rather than tell yourself you're afraid of whatever it is, you say in a loud voice, you say, "I am excited. I am excited to do this. I am excited to do this." Say it 3 times and out loud, and just get louder, that wee bit louder every time. And then take a deep breath. And actually what you'll find is you've tricked your brain. I defy anybody to try it and say it doesn't work, right? But it will actually put a smile on your face. And whatever you're facing, you will go ahead and do it. And it's a trick that I've had for 25 years, and it's just so true. I still get anxiety trying to speak to people in meetings, and it's like I'm excited by this. I'm excited by this. I'm excited by this. Mm-hmm. And actually, yes, you are. It's strange. I've got no. It's just your brain being fooled.
It's something that I've tried. Trick. I've tried it before, Gary, and slightly different in the sense of, like, for example, I go, I need to go to the gym today, but instead of going, I need to go to the gym today, I think, I've got the opportunity to go to the gym today, and it's just that change in mindset. Because I think perspective and mindset is massive, because I'm again, just like everybody else around this table, suffered with my own, cases of anxiety as well. And again, being a sportsman, there is a lot of pressure to perform, and I'm not an elite sportsman, but I play at a decent level. So there is always that kind of, I don't want to let my teammates down, or what if I don't perform today and I get dropped from the team and I'm not in the team next week. So there is always that kind of that bit of anxiety. But I think I've found myself sometimes, even on the pitch, just taking a little bit of a step back and just going, enjoy the experience, because I know I'm not going to be able to play forever. So while I can, again, I get the opportunity to play, go out and just have fun. And I definitely know that I play my best rugby when I'm having fun. And as you say, if you just change that from I'm really scared in this situation to I'm really excited about this situation, it makes a massive difference.
I mean, the vast majority of people have some level of anxiety. Whether it's minor or major, it makes no odds. And it's just such an easy trick to have in your mind that you can do. And yeah, genuinely, it's one of the most brilliant pieces of advice I've ever had professionally or personally to do, because it's just helped me in so many situations. And the other thing to remember is anxiety is, 95% of it is based on something that will never happen to you. You've got a fear of something that will not happen.
It's funny, that's another thing, Gary, and it was only recently, I think it was either in a book I read or a podcast or something, and I think it was something like anticipation is always worse than participation. So you always think it's going to be worse than it is, and I've actually shared that technique and that little saying with my my fiance, and that seems to help her as well, is that because she can sometimes overthink things a little bit, and just that little, anticipation is always worse than participation. Just remind yourself that, and it doesn't change your perspective on things.
Yeah, anybody who overthinks gets really anxious. As I say, it's back to what's making you anxious, right? Is that and then just take a step back and go, is that genuinely going to happen? I've got a fear that somebody will not like me, or somebody will not like my hairdo, or my clothes, or my performance, or whatever it is. It can be something really minor, but it builds up, and 95% of stuff is probably not going to happen to you. Back to Callum's point about looking for the space. Yeah, it's the space is probably there most of the time. It's just that your fear of not seeing it is making you not want to do it.
Yeah, like for myself, it was the fear of crashing again. That I could absolutely see the gap was there, but it was if I had to go for that gap, then I might crash, or I might, something might happen. But it's really, really interesting you saying about the pleasant excitement or unpleasant anxiety, because as I say, studying this at university, we had an exam, and if anybody wants to go and read up on it, it's called reversal theory. That's the theory behind it. It's an academic theory that's absolutely kind of proven. So yeah, it's something that people should really look into, because it's a really, really cool idea.
It's why people like roller coasters. It's fundamentally, that's why people like roller coasters. If you're on a roller coaster, you go from being screaming your head off to whoa. It's because your brain's completely confused. It doesn't know if it should be afraid, petrified out your wits, or if you're to be, really high up in a kind of excitement level. That's it in a very, very, very simple context. That's why people like roller coasters. Remember yourself. That's where you need to be.
Well, see, just before we go on as well, I think it's probably important that we speak about, we're speaking about how anxiety is a bad thing in sport. Arguably, for me, I would say you need to have a level of anxiety, especially in our sport. If someone, like I said to you before, if someone had to say, "Oh, don't get nervous at all," I would almost see that as a bit of a bad thing, especially in our sport where it comes with such dangers. The dangerous aspect of our sport is maybe what makes it exciting. But as a rider, if you don't have that anxiety of the things that could go wrong, and you don't consider things, then it would actually have an adverse effect on your performance as well. And I think, again, that transfers over to most aspects in life. If you don't consider things, I think the anxiety definitely puts things into consideration for you. And as a racer, I would absolutely say that you need to have some sort of level of anxiety, but it just needs to be the right level for you. Everybody's correct level of anxiety is completely different. So there could be 30 riders on the grid. One guy could be really chilled out, but that's his level of anxiety is just where it needs to be. So other people will be sitting on the grid and they'll be, you know, twitching around and fixing everything, and that's where they need to be. It's all completely different. So if you think, oh, my little way's maybe not the same as his, so it's not right, that's absolutely not true. Everybody's different.
Yeah, everybody's got different coping mechanisms. I mean, if you look at, I always used to love watching, what's his name, Usain Bolt. Not for the fact that he was able to do 100 meters in 9.4 seconds, but you watched his behavior before races, and he come across as the most chilled out guy on the planet. You know, I can remember him. He was going up for starting blocks, and there was, like, you know, maybe a girl who would kind of take his tracksuit off him and that sort of stuff, standing by, and he was, I think he got her to like have a go in the starting blocks for him. You know,
I think he like fist bumped her and stuff, and he was just chilled
and
out.
you think, and everybody else is kind of, you can almost like feel the tension, and you know, but behind that, you know, you kind of thought, he's a joking guy and all that sort of stuff. But he's obviously attuned his brain to, that's his way of dealing with stress. Is it's not going to bother me. I'm just going to have a laugh with the girl, but I'm still mentally tuned into what I'm going to do. But I can just basically get on the blocks after that. He's not panicking. He's not getting all too excited about it. That's just his ways dealing with it. But you can bet your bottom dollar it's well rehearsed. It's not as slapstick as you kind of think it is. He's went out probably with that intention, or doing something similar, because he did it quite regularly. Yeah,
I think adding to Callum's point, right, about the whole anxious and being anxious, and how like a little bit of anxiety is important. I'd say, I mean, the proper term or to call that is being mindful in that moment. So, like, especially at least with me, I've had this problem where the problem is not the anxiety, it's the level of anxiety you face. So, and then you start getting into the loop of it. And it's like the infinite loop where you start thinking about the situations which are going to happen, and then you literally predict the outcome in your own head, and you predict the worst outcome, and then you spiral, and then you keep spiraling, and that gets you anxious. What helps, at least in me, in those moments or in general, is being mindful or just watching your surroundings. So even with like Usain Bolt, or I mean, that's like the elite level, but then in general, even at like the minute levels, just focusing in that moment and then looking at your surroundings, what is happening with you, and what you're doing in that moment, and just being mindful of what you're doing. So I think that is what helps a person get out of that loop, or at least that's what has helped me. And I think training yourself to do that, and then regularly doing that, you get to the level of what Usain Bolt did get to at the end.
Yeah, it's a level. It's a type of mindfulness. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, we'll move on a wee bit to, you know, the effect that motorcycle sport perhaps has on your mental health, and then we've kind of spoke about some strategies and stuff like that we've implemented. But you know, I'll kick us off by saying that for me, motorsports had both ends of the spectrum as an effect of my mental health. So one end, it's made me really, really stressed, and you know, the how you perceive it, like we were just talking about, you know, how you're looking at your racing, whether you're looking at, so say you go out and you finish second, you do a PB, but you've finished second, so that's not quite good enough and you're not happy. Whereas, you know, this year, my kind of mental outlook on racing has changed massively since my crash in 2019. Where after that, I was like, oh, you know, I really don't want to do this. And if wasn't performing at the level that I should have been, you know, what I should have been, if you want to call it that. And that really, really got me down. Whereas this year, if I've went out and finished second, I know that I've given everything to get to that second place. And if I've given everything, what else could I have done? And that's something that, you know, your results say what your results were, but that doesn't have a real show of what your performance was. And I think that that's a really important thing for young people to look at. If you go out and you've not quite done your personal best lap time, or you've finished second instead of first, you know, the track might not have been in the best condition or whatever. If you go out and you try as hard as you possibly can try, that's good enough for everybody. I think that's nobody else can ask any more of you than that. And you know, like on the opposite side, racing bikes, even if you do finish second, then you're like, finish second. If once you've kind of stopped thinking about the fact that you finished second, racing bikes and being on bikes in general is just, it releases so many endorphins in your system, and it makes you so happy because it's kind of, well, I'm saying it's what you do. It's what I do to go and have fun. I mean, I go on my bike to have fun, have a laugh, be with the family, and if you come home at the end of the weekend with a broken bike or whatever, then you've still had fun doing it.
I think, yeah, I mean, Callum, like you say, I think that's the case for any sport, any physical activity. It's you do it because you enjoy it. You do it because, it must bring you some form of enjoyment, otherwise you wouldn't do it. But I even take like the example for today. Arif and I were at a 3.5 hour meeting down in Dumfries. That's an hour and a half drive, 3.5 hour meeting, hour and a half drive back up. But before I got home, I just stopped in at the gym. I did a quick half an hour. It was nothing crazy. There was a few push exercises, and even just from that to then sit back in the car, like my mental state was just completely different. Because if I just came straight home, and made my dinner or whatever, and then I would just sit in front of the TV again, then I don't think, I definitely know that I don't sleep as well if I don't do any physical activity that day. So first off, not going to sleep very good, which means probably tomorrow, probably not going to be in the best of moods. It's probably going to have a knock-on effect on my performance, whether it be at work or at training or at rugby or whatever, which is then probably going to have a knock-on effect on my mental health. So that one little half an hour that I've taken out of my day to go to the gym, I know will have a massive effect on not only tonight, but also tomorrow.
Yeah, I can completely back that up. Like during the winter time, as a bike racer, a road racer, our season stops in October time and then doesn't start again until March, April time. So you've got that whole 6 months where you're trying to fill that little adrenaline rush and, keep those endorphins in your system, because that's what we do to make ourselves happy. Obviously, we've got other hobbies and stuff like that, but, I can absolutely say that nothing hits it just like riding a bike does. So, being in the, like you say, even things like being in the gym for mental health, being in the gym is just such a massive thing. For anybody, being in the gym, it releases endorphins as well for the exact same thing, is that it feels good. I mean, sometimes it feels bad if you wake up the next day and you're like, I'm a bit sore, but actually, I don't know anybody. I've never met anybody who doesn't like that feeling, because it makes you feel like you've done something.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, I've had training sessions that I've hated absolutely every single second that I've been doing it. But once you come off, you have a shower, you chill out, you're like, I feel great. I feel great for having done it. But yeah, exactly. It's just, for me, it's any physical activity, any sort of sport. I mean, I'll try any sport, to be honest with you. It definitely has a massive effect on my mental health, both positively and negatively. I mean, I don't know how you guys coped during COVID, but I know, having my sport taken away from me was massive. Granted, there was other aspects that are, being in the house all day or whatever, but not being able to play for a year and a half, almost 2 years, had a massive effect on me.
Yeah, I can absolutely say that as well. And our seasons didn't. Football started, rugby started, a lot of things started before bike racing started again, and it was absolutely, I was for tearing my hair out by the time that everybody was getting back to things, and we still weren't. And when I actually got back, it obviously made me so much happier. But like you say, I mean, the being stuck in COVID. I mean, I'm actually in isolation just now because managed to catch COVID. So even just doing this call tonight, speaking about bikes, is actually making me quite happy compared to what I've been like all week when I've been, sitting doing uni work and looking at theories about psychology like we've just been talking about. It's sitting speaking about bikes tonight has put a smile on my face, and I think that's the effect that even speaking has on things. Speaking about things is just so good.
And I think that comes back to this overarching thing that we're talking about tonight, which is just about feeling comfortable enough to have a conversation, whether it be about, whether it formally be about mental health and go, I'm really struggling today and this is what I maybe need to do, or genuinely just having a conversation about your day. Before we started recording this, we were just chatting about what we were doing today. That in itself is a coping technique. And again, it comes back to the importance of firstly being able to feel confident enough that you can talk, but also the other side of that, and being someone who you know that your friends can rely on to come and speak to, you know, because I think a lot of the time we do always say that it's really, really good to talk about things, but I think also you've got a responsibility to the people in your life to be that support sometimes as well.
I mean, as I said, I've kind of got a training in it to an extent. I'm not a specialist by any means, but you know, I'm interested in the kind of the sort of theoretical into practical side of things. I think it's always good to talk. You don't have to kind of fear that. You know, I think it's one of these things that, you know, again, a bit like physical first aid, you wouldn't walk past somebody in the street who'd kind of fallen. You wouldn't walk past them simply because you didn't know how to do a certain thing, right? You would, you know, the basis of first aid is making somebody comfortable, you know, helping and just that wee bit until somebody else who's better than you or more knowledgeable than you can come along and deal with the situation. And it's the same with mental health first aid as well. The idea is that you are not, in the same way as you're not somebody who can fix a broken leg, you are also somebody who cannot fix somebody's mental challenges necessarily. But if you can actually speak to them, and just to, you know, to Callum's point, you know, he's kind of felt a bit invigorated by the fact he's come and spoken to a few people that he's maybe never met before and about bikes, because it distracts him from what else is going on in his life. That's phenomenally important. You know, you should never kind of walk past the opportunity to kind of listen to somebody speak about their challenges, because it'll probably make them feel, you know, you can't underestimate probably how much better that you make them feel as a consequence of having spoken to them rather than walking past them. It's just big, really big.
I think there's probably an unintended consequence in that as well, Gary, that, you know, you go, well, I've dealt with that problem as well, or I'm going through that as well, you know. So if you maybe don't feel comfortable enough to speak about things, but you're comfortable enough to listen to people, again, it almost gives you that reassurance of going, do you know what, it's not only me, I'm not the only one struggling or with that certain aspect of my life, or however the world is at the moment. So yeah, really, really important thing to consider as well.
Obviously, Gary, in your role, you've, like you say, you look at the theory and you've helped people along the way. You know, even in your role at the Speedway. So what would you say, as you know, we've spoke about our ways of dealing with it. How have you helped people in the past who you've you know, helped along the way?
First of all, I can help myself. So I'm completely different. So bike racing for me, you know, I've kind of barely. I was on a bike probably a good bit younger than you probably, but you know, I've not been on since, and I've got no real interest in. I've got to an age where I've got no interest in being on a bike. But what interests me is obviously I've been a Speedway fan for 40 odd years, and you know, it's just brilliant. And my job's quite stressful. You know, I manage projects with an 8-figure portfolio, and I don't mean the decimal point and the pennies after it. So I use Speedway on a Friday night or whenever it is as a complete switch off. My brain works, and I kind of train my brain to work in a completely different way to kind of, you know, have a good cut between what my professional life does and the stresses of that to get a Speedway. And I just get so involved in the Speedway, and now obviously taking on, you know, getting the sheer having the enthusiasm up and the delight of watching young kids actually take up the sport and go from a situation where they kind of struggle to balance, you know, a small motorbike to the point, and Shabazz sort of saw this about a month ago, you know, within a matter of weeks, we've got 8-year-olds sliding 150cc motorbikes. It's just immense. It's just great. So I kind of use it as escapism. And then when I leave the stadium, I go, oh, I've spent 4 hours there, and it's great, you know. And then I can kind of go back to my job, having used a different part of my brain, and you know, I can go back to it. Otherwise, if I didn't have that, it's all about distractions for me, and for anybody as well. It's important that you have distractions. It's, you know, okay, physical's great. I walk my dog and all that sort of stuff. I'm a bit old for, you know, playing tennis or whatever. I kind of get that now. But I think also quite importantly as well, as when you're speaking to people, is understand that you know, there's actually things to be done with your brain as well, is because this is kind of all, you know, back to Arif's point about overthinking. You know, if you can get a coping mechanism, a distraction that takes you away from what it is that you are overthinking about, you know, whether it's playing a guitar or watching a football game or doing something, that's so important. And if you encourage people to kind of do that, you know, do a jigsaw, whatever it is, it doesn't even have to be very physical. But the important thing is that they can actually take themselves away from where the fear is, if you like, where their stress is. It's so important. But yeah, that's for me. As I say, it's completely the opposite for you, Callum. You know, I'll happily let you have a shot at the bike. It's all good stuff. But yeah, it's all about distractions for me.
Yeah. I think that, you know, like that's actually something that, you know, not to use it as a plug or anything like that, but I mean the SACU in general, across all the clubs and across all the different sports that are affiliated with the SACU, they're always looking for volunteers. And I know fine well that a lot of the volunteers who, you know, people who marshal or people who go as officials at the events or whatever, you know, things like that, they go there for the exact same reason as I go there. They go for a bit of a release. They go to have fun. It's the exact same thing in a completely different role, and it's exactly what you just explained, Gary. You know, like we both go to events for bike racing to have a bit of a release, have a bit of fun, and you know, to get away from the other things that are going on in our life. And I think that you know, everybody should experience it. This, you know, like I say, and not to be a plug, but all the clubs are always looking for volunteers and stuff like that. And if you are considering going to do that as a bit of a release, then I would absolutely recommend it to anybody.
Absolutely. You know, whether it's first aid or, as I say, marshalling or helping people get on with what it is that they want to do, where you can feel that you can add a bit of value. Yeah, get yourself out there. It's good for your well-being.
So the last thing that we kind of were going to speak about was, you know, who would you speak to about your mental health? So, you know, for me, I'm lucky enough to have, you know, a really supportive family round about and a really, you know, healthy band of friends and things like that to speak about, that I'm comfortable speaking about things with. But I know fine well that not everybody will have that, and not only, even people might have that, but they might not be comfortable speaking to their friends and family about it. So, you know, I would always say the first port of call is definitely friends and family, and then other than that, you know, people like your GP. I mean, your GP's trained in all these different things and can refer you to loads of different people to help you with all your mental health needs. So I would definitely, you know, call your GP. There's the Scottish Association for Mental Health, SAMH, Breathing Space, Samaritans, you know, people like that who all have helplines that run. Most of them are 24/7, and you can anonymously speak to people and just get things off your chest if you're not wanting to speak to anybody else about it, and you can do it anonymously to a stranger, and even things like that will make you feel better just by saying things out loud. It might help you deal with it.
So just adding to, say, Callum's point, right? Like I suffer from like my own mental issues, and before or until recently, I shouldn't be saying this, but then I was ashamed of talking about it because I felt, or I had the stigma in my own head that, I don't know, it's something bad, or it's not something that's to be spoken about. And I think even when I started interning with SACU, initially I was enthusiastic, I was doing the work, but then that got derailed. And then for like a long moment, I couldn't speak to Shabazz, or I couldn't tell him what the problem was. And I think here with this release, right, I have been seeking professional help where I go to a therapist and people discard it. And then some like you have things like, where you call it them as shrinks and stuff. But then I think professional help really does help, because what the problem with, like, say, when you suffer from like a proper mental health problem is that when you suffer like spiral with your own problems, you think of the worst, but then when you go and speak out to a professional, and then when they actually tell you that this is not that bad, and then you have ways to cope with it, and then they help you understand what the problem is. And it's like any other disease. Like, I mean, if you have cold, you would obviously have a runny nose, and then you cannot really help. So it's not you that's the problem, it's a disease which is a problem. So even the same with mental health, sometimes you blame yourself. You're like, why am I not doing well? Why am I feeling that bad? So it's not me who's like having the trouble, it is, say, the disease. So I think the perspective and like say, in general the help, which especially with it. So like you were talking about, so I mean, at least me, I haven't seen taken much help in this country, but then I speak to my therapist back from India, and then I have like constant, at least say once a month I go and then I seek therapy, and then that's personally helped me with it. And that's also helped me open up, and then it also helped me, let's say, come about even to this podcast. I don't think I could have done it like a year or two ago, where I could have even said on an open platform that I have this problem. So I think professional help does help you a lot in that way. Yeah.
I think one of the things about mental health first aid is, and I touched on it earlier, is in the same way as while I do physical first aid and I see somebody with a broken leg, I can't fix their broken leg, but I can help them get to someone who can. Same with mental health first aid. It's signposting. You know, you're kind of listening to somebody, understanding what the challenge is and what their issue is, and if you can give some kind of words of comfort, then that's great. If you make them feel a wee bit better, but there is a recognition that obviously there might be something beyond that you kind of need to help. You know, all the way up to kind of worst case scenario around about suicide as an example, or suicidal thoughts. But it's you know, there is plenty help out there. Bodies, GPs, you know. Even if self-help is your thing, okay, you know, there's lots of for instance, I mean, I mentioned distractions earlier on, but there's also things like mental health apps out there. You know, so if you don't feel that you want to go and speak to someone because you feel you're burdening them, although you shouldn't feel that way, you know, something like headspace.com is sort of feel, you know, that's not a plug. I use kind of Headspace. I get Headspace for free, so it's great. I'm quite happy to promote them. But there's other ones as well, but they've got lots of tools and techniques and you know, help that you can kind of just access on your phone. You know, there's meditation, there's mindfulness. There's lots of different stuff, because it's not a one size fits all solution as well. Is in the same way as, you know, if you're learning something, some people learn by having somebody tell them it, some people read, some people listen, to an audio tape or you know, whatever it may be. We all learn in different ways. We also will take different ways of kind of dealing with, you know, what's troubling us. And as I say, it has to be recognised. There's no one way. It's kind of trying things, and you might have to take a few things before you actually get to, you know, seeing something or experiencing, dealing with something that you feel that works for you. I think that's the important thing. It's, you know, don't, you know, I always, you know, my daughter's always one of these people who kind of says, oh, you know, gets a bit anxious, and you say, you know, have you tried doing whatever? No, I've tried that. Well, try something else, or try it again, or try it in a different way, because there will be something out there that will help you. There's no doubt about it. So lots of different ways that you can help yourself. And but as I say, for me, there is no, being a social animal, there is no substitute for talking to people. And if you've got the ability to listen, you know, just shut up and listen. It's amazing what you can pull out of somebody.
If you had, say, a broken arm, and you know, your doctor had healed your broken arm, and then your muscles weren't quite right round about it, and you weren't as strong as you once were, so you would go and see a physio. It's now a massive thing in sport, especially. I mean, if you're listening to this to try and get some you know, tips about sport, you know, about how your mental health can affect your sporting career. You know, I don't I can't think of a single elite athlete now who hasn't got a sports psychologist. It's the exact same thing. You know, if you had a broken arm, you would go to your doctor. If you'd pulled a muscle, you would go to your physio. If you're suffering from mental health, there's sports psychologists out there now as well as clinical psychologists for people who are struggling with everyday life. There's sports psychologists too, and they are becoming equally as important as a personal trainer and a physiotherapist now in sport. So you know, became such a more normal thing to do. So yeah, that's all I was going to say there. What were you going to say, Arif?
No, I mean, I was just reiterating the same point that the problem in general, right? When like the way Gary was speaking, that the main problem, especially when you have mental health issues, you think that you're becoming a burden, and even like say sharing your problems to others, you feel that you're just burdening them. But then I'd say like start with your own family, see like who you're closest to. It could be your partner, it could be your girl, let's say your girlfriend, your mother, your father. Then start off there, and then always try seeking professional help, because it genuinely helps. Like I'm speaking about with my personal experience. Until I seek personal help, I did not know what I was suffering from. I knew there was something wrong with me, and there was like I had like some issues, like I had suicidal issues, and I was going through a lot, but then I did not know what it was. And until you can name it, there is like say once your professional therapist can name it, then it becomes easier for you, because when you can see the symptoms and you know the disease, then it is easier to find the cure for it as well. So it is a process as well. So absolutely, like start off with speaking to your family, and then how you're talking about say people, we go to like a physician or like a normal doctor when we have any physical disease. You have sports psychologists, and then you have clinical psychologists as well. So it is, I mean, they would know, and then you should absolutely go to them and speak to them, even if you're not feeling it, right? It all starts with, I'm not feeling it today, and then it just spirals into it. So when that happens, you should be able to, I mean, if you're not able to, let's say, speak to someone, you could directly go to like a doctor or a GP. You could like go to a GP, speak about it, and then they'll refer you to a clinical psychologist. And then just talking about it really helps, because if you just put it in, it'll only pile on. And if you don't really share with it, like with everyone, you would think you are sinking in this world, but then nothing is going to happen. No one else will know unless you actually speak like to people about it. So yeah, you should take professional help. That's my 2 cents.
It's okay to be not okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
Just to your point, Arif. Some days you will feel better than others.
Exactly.
Mental health is variable. You have good. Everybody has it, but everybody is good or bad, and as I say, it is variable, and it's a journey. Even if you have bad mental health consistently, your kind of route out is, it's not like taking necessarily taking a load of antibiotics for 2 weeks and then you kind of feel a bit better after that and you're okay. Quite often it's a long journey, but you kind of have to realize it is a journey. But you will have good days and you will have not so good days. But it's the coping with it's a recognition that it is okay, or I can kind of try and deal with it using my coping techniques. Whether it's speaking to people, doing something yourself, or whatever. I think one of the other things, just very, very quickly, is probably just an understanding. Is a lot of people, when they kind of get challenged to sort of say, "What do you do after a stressful day?" Try it for yourself. List 5 things you would do after a stressful day. I bet you they're all solo activities. Whether it's going to the gym or walking your dog or cycling or whatever it is. One of the things to watch is that if you kind of do something consistently that's on your own, where you don't talk to anybody, you just get on and you do it, and whether you're punching a punch bag or hitting the weights, or you're going like mad on a rowing machine, or whatever it is, just always just keep in the back of your head, it's good to talk and it's good to speak to someone, because it's a different experience, I think. So again, that's another tip for me is don't go down the line of just keeping it all to yourself, because ultimately it will probably come back at you after, it's a wee bit like, having a drink, and it's sort of, for those of us that have a drink now and again, you'll feel a bit happier, but after that you kind of come back to where you were, because at the end of the day it's a drug, it's releasing something in your body. But yeah, it's always better to talk. So get yourself into a situation whereas, with someone or a group of people that you can kind of sort of get out and do something with as a group. It's always helpful.
Is there anything else that anybody wants to add to the people who are listening? I think we've actually covered quite a lot tonight. It's been pretty good. I think we'll definitely have helped a few people, and like even just listening to us talking about our problems, like you say, might show people that that's what they're feeling. So no, I think not to pat our own back or anything, but I think we've done a pretty good job tonight. So thank you to the three guests here who have obviously shared all their stories and their experiences within sport and within normal life. Yeah, it's been a really, really good podcast, and thank you very much for everybody for listening.
Well done, Callum. Thank you.
Perfect. Cheers, Callum.